Welcome back to Business Wisdom. We cover everything related to stocks and investing on this channel. In today's video, we'll discuss the current collapse of Evergrande Group, China's second largest property developer with trillions of yuan in assets and liabilities. They owe more than $300 billion in liabilities, and they're likely to default as soon as this week because they don't have enough cash to make interest payments. It's difficult to overestimate the Chinese economy's potential devastation in the event of a default. The real estate industry accounts for roughly 20% of the country's GDP. Currency controls make investing in the stock market difficult, so many people turn to real estate as an alternative. This has resulted in property price bubbles in many Chinese cities, with people frequently purchasing unfinished properties that sit empty for years while waiting for prices to rise. Evergrande finances residential property developments and sells them to individuals as both personal residences and investments. They reaped enormous benefits as the real estate bubble inflated. They took out hundreds of billions of dollars in loans to fund new real estate developments. They were able to sell these properties at high prices, resulting in massive profits. In 2017, their stock price increased fivefold, giving them a market capitalization of more than 300 billion Hong Kong dollars. Unfortunately, their profitability was built on the back of the house of cards, which is now collapsing. Evergrande has hundreds of creditors as well as thousands of suppliers. An unorganized default would be similar to a domino effect, resulting in a wave of defaults throughout the Chinese financial system. In the worst-case scenario, it could have a similar impact to Lehman Brothers' default in 2008. In this video, we'll go over what Evergrande does, how they got to their current precarious financial situation, and how it will affect the Chinese economy. Zhu Jian founded Evergrande in 1997. As the Chinese real estate market developed in the 2000s, the company expanded rapidly. They construct large real estate development projects and sell the finished products to end users. These projects necessitate a significant initial investment. So the only way to grow quickly is to incur a lot of debt. They fund them with a combination of their own cash on hand and down payments from end customers, and a significant portion of that was in 2009. They go public on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, raising $700 million to invest in new growth initiatives. By this point, Evergrande had become one of China's largest property developers, and Zhu had become a billionaire. His ambitions, however, were far from over. They ventured into businesses other than real estate, such as the Guangzhou Evergrande football team, an electric vehicle unit, asset management, and life insurance. They even started their own mineral water company. Throughout the 2010s, the company grew increasingly bloated, with assets and liabilities ballooning to trillions of Chinese yuan. However, as long as the real estate market was inflated, their highly profitable development projects were more than enough to cover their liabilities, and their expansion into other ventures had no effect on their core real estate business. They are currently working on a $24 billion artificial island off the coast of China called Ocean Flower Island. The Chinese government began to be concerned about a potential real estate bubble in late 2020. They enacted new rules governing the amount of debt that property developers are permitted to incur. This was done to reduce leverage in the real estate sector and keep the bubble from exploding. However, it was too late at this point. Evergrande was forced to fire-sell existing properties at heavily discounted prices in order to comply with these rules. The government also limited the amount of money that banks could lend to property developers in December. This made it more difficult for them to roll their debt over to later maturities. And how much they had, even minor losses on property sales and a positive liquidity crisis were significant. By the summer of 2021, at the latest, they began having difficulty paying the construction contractors who work on their developments. Evergrande pays the construction company using commercial paper. They essentially issue an IOU stating that they will pay a certain amount of cash at a later date. If their rate of new property sales slows even slightly, they will be unable to meet many of these IOU requirements. Keep in mind that Evergrande collects a down payment from customers at the start of the project, and the new homeowner must wait a few years for the property to be completed. If Evergrande declares bankruptcy before completing the project, the homebuyer may be left holding the bag. The company's precarious financial situation became a major topic in Chinese media beginning in the early summer. Prospective homebuyers were understandably hesitant to make down payments on Evergrande properties as a result of this. In July, new property sale contracts fell nearly 40% from the previous month to 43 billion yuan, and in August, they fell another 13%. With sales declining, they were unable to meet their commercial paper obligations to their construction contractors. These contractors began suing them for failing to make timely payments. This caused a vicious cycle with their financial problems, resulting in negative media attention, which in turn decreased sales, worsening their financial situation. On September 15, Chinese authorities issued a warning to banks that Evergrande would be unable to make its scheduled interest payments. They're desperately trying to stay afloat with no money left. They began offering partially finished and unfinished properties to contractors in lieu of cash payments, to the point where any of them other than these will likely be at a steep discount to Evergrande development costs, exacerbating their solvency problems. Evergrande also has a wealth management division that sells insurance policies and other financial products to individuals. They lacked the funds to make contractually required payments, and thus defaulted on many of these products. Investors were understandably outraged and began protesting at the company's headquarters, demanding their money back. They began offering these people partially finished homes in exchange for cash at up to a 50% discount. They also attempted to sell some of their subsidiaries, such as their electric vehicle unit, in a desperate attempt to raise cash. However, because these subsidiaries rely on Evergrande for financing, they have been unable to find buyers for these assets. At this point, bankruptcy, or at the very least a major restructuring, is almost certain, and common equity holders will almost certainly be wiped out. This is reflected in the stock price, which has dropped by more than 80% since the start of the year. Their bonds are now worth pennies on the dollar. Evergrande employs 200,000 people directly, including construction workers who work for their contractors. However, given the size of their liabilities, they indirectly employ 3.8 million people. If they default, many of their creditors will almost certainly go bankrupt as well. This could result in a widespread financial system freeze, cutting off liquidity to other property developers. Keep in mind that the real estate sector accounts for 20% of the Chinese economy. The credit crunch could jeopardize tens of millions of construction jobs and send the country into a deep recession. Of course, the Chinese government will do everything possible to prevent this from occurring. The most likely scenario is that the country's state-owned banks will organize a bailout. Consumers will almost certainly be prioritized in any potential bailout. People who purchased Evergrande's wealth management products were given down payments for Evergrande properties. Construction contractors and domestic creditors will be first in line, followed by stockholders. And, in any restructuring, the common equity will almost certainly be diluted to the point of being worthless. A situation similar to that of AIG following the financial crisis is possible. Despite the fact that AIG's business has recovered significantly over the last decade, their equity was so heavily diluted as a result of the bailout that shareholders who bought in 2007 are still down 95%. The government has enough resources to bail out Evergrande and avert a financial crisis in the near future. However, this situation exemplifies China's overly leveraged corporate sector. Corporations have taken on massive debt loads in order to invest in the expanding economy over the last decade. The country's total debt exceeds 250% of GDP. The government's recent regulations were the straw that broke the camel's back in the case of Evergrande. However, their leverage was so high that a collapse would almost certainly have occurred on its own sooner or later. Recent restrictions on property developer leverage ratios imposed by the government may be sufficient to cool real estate sector and prevent more serious financial crises in the future. The rapid and spectacular meltdown of Evergrande, on the other hand, demonstrates that there are serious risks on the horizon. That's all there is to it for this video. What are your thoughts on the Evergrande situation? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. If you like this content, please like it and subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. Thank you so much for watching, as always. We'll catch up in the next one.